The best jobs in ancient Rome you'd actually want. When people think about working in ancient Rome, they usually imagine slaves breaking rocks, soldiers dying on distant frontiers, or poor citizens barely scraping by in crowded tenements. And yes, those jobs absolutely existed. Life for many Romans was brutal, short, and exhausting. But here's the surprising truth. Ancient Rome also had some genuinely amazing jobs. Jobs that paid well. Jobs that offered comfort, respect, travel, power, and sometimes even luxury. If you were lucky, clever, skilled, or well-connected, you could live a life many modern people would envy. So today, we're going to explore the best jobs in ancient Rome you'd actually want, not the romanticized fantasies, but the real roles that offered security, influence, and a good quality of life. These are the jobs that made ancient Rome function, and made some Romans very, very comfortable. Senator, power without punching a clock. Let's start at the very top. Being a Roman senator was not just a job, it was a lifestyle of influence, privilege, and prestige. Senators didn't work 9-to-5 schedules or perform physical labor. Their work involved politics, debate, lawmaking, and controlling the direction of the empire. Senators were almost always wealthy landowners. They lived in large villas, owned farms worked by tenants or slaves, and collected income without lifting a finger. Their days were filled with meetings, public appearances, and private negotiations. The real perk wasn't just money, it was power. A senator could shape laws, influence emperors, and decide the fate of provinces. Even under emperors, the Senate still mattered, especially in administration and legal affairs. Socially, senators were untouchable. They wore distinctive clothing, had reserved seating at events, and enjoyed legal privileges ordinary citizens could only dream of. The downside? Politics could be dangerous. Say the wrong thing, back the wrong emperor, or get caught in a conspiracy, and your career and life could end suddenly. But if you were cautious, skilled with words, and good at alliances, being a senator was one of the best jobs in the ancient world. Provincial governor, absolute authority abroad. Imagine being sent to govern an entire region with near total authority. That was the life of a Roman provincial governor. Governors were responsible for taxation, law enforcement, military oversight, and administration in provinces like Gaul, Egypt, or Syria. In many cases, their word was law. The salary alone was impressive, but the real money came from influence, gifts, and fees. While outright corruption was illegal, enforcement was inconsistent, and many governors returned to Rome extremely wealthy. Governors lived in luxury residences, surrounded by staff, soldiers, and local elites eager to gain favor. They presided over courts, led ceremonies, and represented Rome itself. This job also came with travel, exposure to different cultures, and a level of independence unimaginable back in the capital. The risk? Abuse of power could lead to prosecution if political enemies turned against you. But if you governed carefully and maintained good connections, this was one of the most lucrative roles in the empire. Military tribune, prestige without endless marching. Not all military jobs were equal. While ordinary soldiers faced harsh discipline and dangerous campaigns, military tribunes lived a very different life. Tribunes were junior officers, often from wealthy families, serving as part of their political education. They commanded respect, avoided the worst physical labor, and gained leadership experience without spending decades in service. Their duties involved administration, planning, and oversight rather than frontline fighting, though bravery was still expected. Serving as a tribune boosted social status and opened doors to future political careers. Many future senators and governors began here. It was essentially a resume builder with armor. For young elites, this was one of the smartest career moves in ancient Rome. Architect, the mind behind Rome's monuments. Rome didn't build itself. Behind every aqueduct, amphitheater, bathhouse, and temple stood a skilled architect. Roman architects were highly respected professionals combining engineering, mathematics, and artistic vision. They designed structures that still stand today, nearly 2,000 years later. This was not manual labor. Architects planned projects, supervised workers, and solved complex technical problems. Their work directly shaped the empire's cities. Successful architects earned high pay, steady commissions, and elite patrons. Some worked directly for emperors, which meant wealth and protection. They also enjoyed intellectual respect, something rare in a world dominated by warriors and politicians. If you liked problem solving, design, and prestige, this was a dream job. Physician, high risk, high reward. Medicine in ancient Rome wasn't modern, but good physicians were in demand and well paid. Doctors treated everyone from slaves to emperors. Wealthy Romans paid handsomely for competent medical care, especially personal physicians who lived in the household. Many doctors were Greek, trained in medical schools and philosophical traditions. A skilled physician could gain fame, fortune, and powerful patrons. Some even earned freedom if they were enslaved. The job came with risks. Failed treatments could damage reputation, but successful doctors enjoyed respect and financial security. In a world without modern healthcare, being someone who could relieve pain and save lives was invaluable. Lawyer, words that changed lives. Roman society was obsessed with law. Court cases were public events, and skilled lawyers, called advocates, were stars. They didn't just argue facts, they performed speeches filled with emotion, logic, and drama. A great lawyer could sway crowds and judges alike. Successful advocates gained fame, political connections, and gifts from grateful clients. Some charged fees, others used legal success to build influence and future careers. Many senators started as lawyers, using the courtroom as a training ground for politics. If you had a sharp mind and a powerful voice, this was one of the best careers in Rome. Tax contractor, the business of empire. Rome didn't collect all its taxes directly. Instead, it relied on tax contractors, known as publicani. These individuals paid the state upfront for the right to collect taxes in a region. Anything they collected beyond that amount was profit. This system created enormous wealth opportunities. While controversial and often disliked by locals, tax contractors were essential to the empire's finances. Successful publicani became incredibly rich and influential, funding public works and political campaigns. Morally questionable? Often. Financially rewarding? Absolutely. Merchant, global trade before globalization. Roman merchants operated across an astonishing network. From Britain to India, goods flowed through Roman trade routes. Silk, spices, wine, olive oil, metals, everything moved through merchant hands. Successful merchants could amass fortunes rivaling senators, even if they lacked the same social prestige. Merchants traveled, took risks, and understood markets. Some specialized in shipping, others in luxury goods. While storms, pirates, and losses were dangers, the rewards were enormous. This was one of the best jobs for ambitious non-elites who wanted wealth. Banker, quiet power behind the scenes. Roman bankers, called argentarii, handled loans, deposits, currency exchange, and financial contracts. They financed businesses, politicians, and even emperors. While they avoided public attention, their influence was immense. A successful banker enjoyed financial security, elite clients, and social mobility. Money talks, and bankers controlled its flow. Scribe, literacy as a superpower. In a largely illiterate world, scribes were indispensable. They wrote contracts, recorded transactions, copied texts, and managed records for officials and businesses. Scribes avoided physical labor and enjoyed steady income. Many worked in government offices or wealthy households. For intelligent individuals without noble birth, this was a path to stability and respect. Teacher, educating the elite. Education mattered to Rome's upper classes. Teachers, especially those teaching rhetoric and philosophy, shaped future leaders. Wealthy families paid well for good educators. Some teachers gained fame and patronage, living comfortably while influencing generations of elites. Knowledge, in this case, truly was power. Engineer, solving Rome's toughest problems. Roman engineers designed roads, bridges, siege machines, and infrastructure. They were practical problem solvers, often working closely with the military and state. This job combined respect, pay, and long-term impact. Roman engineering achievements still influence modern design. Estate manager, running wealth without owning it. Large estates needed professional management. Estate managers supervised farms, workers, finances, and production. While not owners, skilled managers lived comfortably and held authority over significant operations. It was a stable, respected role with room for advancement. Imperial administrator, serving the emperor directly. The imperial bureaucracy ran the empire. Administrators managed records, logistics, and correspondence for the emperor. This was one of the safest paths to power, working behind the scenes, close to authority, but away from public danger. Loyal administrators enjoyed protection, rewards, and influence. Why these jobs actually mattered? These weren't glamorous fantasies. They were real roles that offered stability, respect, wealth, influence, protection. In a world where survival wasn't guaranteed, these jobs provided something priceless: control over your own life. Ancient Rome was harsh, but it rewarded skill, intelligence, and ambition. And if you had the right job, Rome wasn't just survivable, it was extraordinary. In Part 1, we explored the elite and professional careers that made ancient Rome not just survivable, but genuinely rewarding. Now it's time to go deeper, into the less obvious jobs that still offered comfort, respect, and opportunity. Because not everyone could be a senator or governor. Yet Rome was so vast, so complex, that it created thousands of roles where smart, capable people could thrive. Some of these jobs didn't look impressive on the surface, but they quietly built fortunes, security, and influence. Let's continue. Shipping magnate, owning the arteries of empire. Rome ran on trade, and trade ran on ships. Grain from Egypt, olive oil from Spain, wine from Gaul, marble from Greece, none of it arrived by accident. Behind it all were shipping magnates, men who owned fleets of merchant vessels. This was not a job for sailors. This was ownership. Shipping magnates invested in ships, hired crews, and managed contracts. The Roman state itself depended on them, especially for grain shipments to feed the massive population of Rome. Because food shortages meant riots. As a result, shipping magnates enjoyed state protection, tax benefits, and political favor. Some were even granted citizenship privileges or honorary titles. The risks, storms, pirates, shipwrecks, were real. But the profits were enormous. Successful ship owners became some of the wealthiest people in the empire, often rivaling old aristocratic families. If you wanted wealth without politics, this was one of the smartest paths. Grain distributor, feeding the capital. Closely connected to shipping was one of the most powerful logistical roles in Rome: grain distribution. Rome's population depended on regular grain handouts, known as the annona. Managing storage, transport, and distribution was a massive operation. Officials and contractors overseeing grain distribution held extraordinary responsibility. If grain flowed, the city stayed calm. If it stopped, chaos followed. This made the job both dangerous and powerful. But those who did it well earned trust, wealth, and long-term security. They worked with warehouses, shipping companies, and the state itself. In many ways, grain officials held more real power over daily life than senators debating laws. Public works contractor, paid to build forever. Rome never stopped building. Roads, bridges, baths, temples, aqueducts, forums. Every emperor wanted to leave a legacy carved in stone. Public works contractors won state-funded contracts to build these projects. They hired labor, sourced materials, and delivered results. This was big business. Once you proved reliable, contracts kept coming. The state paid well, especially for critical infrastructure. Contractors didn't need noble birth, just organization, engineering knowledge, and political connections. Many built fortunes that lasted generations, passing businesses down to their children. Rome's skyline was their resume. Stone quarry owner, controlling raw power. Marble wasn't just decoration, it was propaganda. Emperors loved marble. Cities demanded it. Temples required it. Owning or managing a stone quarry meant controlling the raw materials of empire. Quarry owners supplied builders, sculptors, and architects. The work itself was brutal, for laborious, but ownership was lucrative. This job didn't carry much public glamour, but it delivered consistent income and long-term wealth. In a stone-built civilization, rock was money. Sculptor, immortality through art. While most artists struggled, successful sculptors lived well. Rome demanded statues of gods, emperors, generals, and wealthy patrons. A respected sculptor could secure commissions worth years of income. Famous sculptors gained recognition across the empire. Their workshops employed apprentices and assistants, turning art into an industry. This was skilled labor with prestige. Sculptors shaped how Rome remembered itself. Long after emperors died, their statues stood. That kind of legacy mattered. Mosaic artist, luxury underfoot. Wealthy Romans loved mosaics. Floors, walls, baths, intricate scenes made of thousands of tiny tiles signaled taste and status. Mosaic artists were highly specialized craftsmen. The best ones worked exclusively for elite clients. They traveled, negotiated contracts, and commanded high fees. Their work was permanent and admired daily. In a culture obsessed with display, beauty paid. Perfumer, luxury in a bottle. Rome adored luxury scents. Perfumes were used in religious rituals, social gatherings, baths, and daily life. Exotic ingredients came from Arabia, India, and Africa. Perfumers blended oils, resins, and flowers into highly valued products. This was not a low-status trade. Successful perfumers catered to elites and made serious money. Smell, in Rome, was status. Bathhouse manager, running Rome's social heart. Bathhouses weren't just for washing. They were social hubs, business centers, and relaxation spaces. Managing a bathhouse meant overseeing staff, maintenance, scheduling, and services. Popular bathhouses generated steady income. Managers worked closely with city officials and wealthy patrons. It was a public-facing job with prestige and profit. In Rome, controlling leisure meant controlling influence. Gladiator trainer, fame without the arena. Gladiators were celebrities, but their trainers held the real power. Gladiator trainers, often former fighters, ran schools, managed talent, and negotiated contracts with arena organizers. They weren't risking their lives anymore, but they were earning off those who did. Successful trainers became wealthy and well-known. They lived comfortably and commanded respect. They shaped legends without dying for applause. Arena organizer, entertainment is business. Games were expensive and profitable. Arena organizers coordinated events, hired gladiators, managed animals, and handled logistics. This role required organization, negotiation, and political savvy. Successful games boosted public approval and personal reputation. Organizers often used events to launch political careers. Entertainment wasn't just fun, it was strategy. Horse breeder, speed equals status. Chariot racing was Rome's most popular sport. Owning and breeding fast horses meant wealth and fame. Horse breeders supplied racing teams, military units, and elite stables. A winning horse could bring enormous profit and prestige. Speed made kings and commoners rich. Chariot team manager, behind the madness. While charioteers risked their lives, team managers handled contracts, training, finances, and strategy. They owned teams, hired drivers, and controlled operations. This was a business empire built on entertainment. Successful managers lived lavishly, often more safely than the racers they employed. Wine producer, bottling Roman culture. Wine wasn't optional, it was daily life. Rome drank wine with meals, rituals, and celebrations. Wine producers managed vineyards, fermentation, storage, and trade. High-quality wine was a luxury product, traded across the empire. A respected wine producer enjoyed steady income, land ownership, and social respect. In Rome, wine wasn't a vice, it was culture. Olive oil producer, liquid gold. Olive oil powered Rome. It fueled lamps, cooked food, cleaned bodies, and supported rituals. Olive oil producers supplied cities, armies, and households. This was one of the most reliable industries in the empire. Steady demand meant steady wealth. Clothing manufacturer, dressing an empire. Togas, tunics, cloaks, Rome needed clothes. Textile producers managed workshops weaving wool and linen. Quality clothing signaled rank and citizenship. Those who controlled production controlled fashion and profit. Jeweler, status in gold. Roman elites loved jewelry. Rings, necklaces, brooches, symbols of wealth and identity. Jewelers worked with precious metals and gems from across the empire. Skilled jewelers earned trust, protection, and wealth. Luxury never goes out of style. Book publisher, knowledge as currency. Books were copied by hand. Publishers employed scribes to reproduce texts and sell them. Philosophy, poetry, law, knowledge had value. Publishers shaped intellectual culture and earned steady income. Ideas, even then, were profitable. Librarian, guardian of memory. Libraries were prestigious institutions. Librarians managed collections, organized texts, and supported scholars. This was a respected, intellectual role with stability and influence. In a world without printing, memory mattered. Urban planner, designing Roman life. Rome's cities followed patterns, roads, forums, markets. Urban planners coordinated development and infrastructure. Their work shaped daily life for millions. Order was power. Why these jobs were good lives? These weren't jobs of desperation. They offered predictable income, social respect, personal safety, upward mobility, long-term influence. In ancient Rome, that was rare. Most people struggled just to survive. These careers gave something more: control, dignity, and legacy. By now, it should be clear that ancient Rome wasn't just a place of hardship. It was a system, a massive, finely tuned machine. And like any great machine, it needed people who understood how to keep it running smoothly. In this part, we move into the underrated, behind-the-scenes careers. These weren't flashy. They didn't always bring public fame. But they delivered something just as valuable: stability, safety, and quiet power. For many Romans, these were the smartest jobs you could possibly have. Imperial secretary, the pen that ruled the empire. The emperor ruled Rome, but he didn't work alone. Behind every decree, letter, and command stood the imperial secretaries. These men handled correspondence, drafted laws, recorded decisions, and organized information. This was one of the most powerful non-military positions in the empire. Secretaries were close to the emperor, often knowing plans before anyone else. They influenced wording, timing, and execution. Many were freedmen who rose from slavery to immense power. It was quiet authority, and often safer than public politics. Census official, knowing everyone's business. Rome loved records. The census determined taxes, military service, and social status. Officials who ran censuses held immense influence. They decided how people were classified, and classification meant money. This job offered steady income, protection, and long-term employment. Information was power, even 2,000 years ago. Customs officer, profiting at the border. Every port, road, and border had taxes. Customs officers collected duties on goods entering and leaving regions. Trade couldn't avoid them. This made the role profitable, stable, and deeply connected to commerce. While not loved, customs officers were respected and protected by law. It was a job that paid quietly but consistently. Market inspector, controlling fairness and profit. Markets were essential to Roman life. Market inspectors regulated prices, weights, and quality. They enforced fairness, but also wielded influence over merchants. This role came with authority, respect, and opportunities for advancement. In Rome, controlling markets meant controlling daily life. Dockyard administrator, master of movement. Ports were chaotic. Ships arrived constantly, unloading goods, animals, and people. Dockyard administrators organized schedules, storage, labor, and fees. This was logistics at its highest level. Well-run ports meant smooth trade, and smooth trade meant wealth. Administrators became indispensable. Warehouse supervisor, the invisible backbone. Goods had to be stored safely. Warehouse supervisors managed inventory, security, and distribution. This job offered steady income and responsibility. Nothing glamorous, but nothing risky either. In Rome, reliability was priceless. Mint worker, making money literal. Coins powered the economy. Mint workers struck currency under strict supervision. It was skilled, respected work with stable pay. The job required trust, and trust brought protection. Few professions were as directly tied to state power. Financial auditor, watching the watchers. Rome needed accountability. Auditors reviewed accounts of officials, contractors, and administrators. They ensured taxes and funds were properly handled. This was a role of oversight and influence. Auditors often gained powerful allies and enemies. But their position was protected by law. Legal clerk, the engine of justice. Courts were busy. Legal clerks prepared documents, organized cases, and assisted judges. This role offered stability, respect, and a pathway into law. Many clerks eventually became advocates or officials. It was a smart entry point into Roman administration. Prison administrator, order over chaos. Prisons weren't about punishment, they were holding facilities. Prison. Administrators managed detainees awaiting trial or punishment. It wasn't pleasant, but it was authoritative and protected. The job offered steady income and official status. In a violent world, law enforcement roles brought security. Fire brigade officer, protecting the city. Rome burned often. Fire brigade officers organized response teams, equipment, and patrols. They were essential to urban safety. This role brought respect and sometimes public gratitude. It also came with political visibility. Saving cities meant saving careers. Building inspector, keeping Rome standing. Rome built big, and sometimes dangerously. Building inspectors ensured structures met standards. They could shut down unsafe projects. This job carried authority and influence. Safety was a serious matter in crowded cities. Waterworks administrator, controlling life itself. Water was everything. Aqueducts, fountains, baths. Without them, Rome collapsed. Waterworks administrators oversaw maintenance and distribution. They controlled access to the most vital resource. This role came with immense responsibility and respect. No water meant riots. Road supervisor, holding the empire together. Rome's roads were legendary. Road supervisors maintained routes, bridges, and milestones. They coordinated repairs and labor. Good roads meant fast armies and efficient trade. This job connected directly to imperial power. Messenger coordinator, speed is power. Messages traveled fast in Rome, for the time. Messenger coordinators organized couriers across the empire. They managed routes, horses, and schedules. Information delivered on time changed outcomes. This was communication as strategy. Archive keeper, memory is authority. Rome documented everything. Archive keepers protected legal records, decrees, and history. Their role was quiet, but critical. Without records, claims vanished. Archives preserved legitimacy. Translator, bridging the empire. Rome ruled many cultures. Translators handled Greek, Latin, Egyptian, and more. They worked in courts, diplomacy, and trade. Language skill meant opportunity. Communication built empire. Diplomatic aid, power without the spotlight. Ambassadors needed support. Diplomatic aides prepared documents, negotiated details, and gathered intelligence. They traveled, learned cultures, and built networks. This job offered excitement and influence without public danger. Intelligence collector, knowing first. Rome watched its enemies. Intelligence collectors gathered information on rivals and provinces. This role was subtle, dangerous, but rewarding. Trusted agents earned protection and favor. Information won wars. Why these jobs were smart choices? These careers shared key advantages. Low physical risk. Consistent income. Legal protection. Access to power. Long-term security. They didn't rely on fame. They relied on function. And Rome always rewarded function. So far, we've covered power jobs, professional careers, trade-based wealth, and the quiet administrative roles that truly held the empire together. Now it's time to look at a side of Roman life many people underestimate. Luxury. Comfort. Status. Proximity to wealth. Ancient Rome may have been harsh for the poor, but for those who served the elite, supplied the elite, or enhanced elite lifestyles, life could be surprisingly comfortable. These were the jobs that didn't just pay, you lived well while doing them. Personal steward, managing a rich life. Wealthy Romans didn't manage their own lives. They hired personal stewards to oversee finances, staff, schedules, estates, and business interests. A good steward was trusted with everything: money, secrets, connections. This role offered stable income, authority, and protection. Stewards often lived in luxury households, ate well, and avoided hard labor. Some stewards quietly became wealthy themselves through bonuses, gifts, and long-term loyalty. Managing wealth was a career in itself. Household administrator, power inside the villa. Large Roman households were complex organizations. Household administrators coordinated servants, slaves, tutors, guards, and supplies. They handled logistics, discipline, and daily operations. This was a position of authority and respect, often held by educated individuals. If you ran a great household, your reputation spread among elites. Order was luxury. Private tutor, Educating the future elite. Rich Roman families hired private tutors to educate their children. These tutors taught reading, writing, rhetoric, philosophy, mathematics, and ethics. It was a prestigious role with good pay and comfortable living conditions. Tutors often lived with the family, traveled with them, and formed lifelong relationships with powerful patrons. Teaching the future rulers of Rome was influence in disguise. Rhetoric coach, training voices of power. Public speaking ruled Roman life. Rhetoric coaches trained politicians, lawyers, and generals to speak persuasively. A great coach could transform an ordinary speaker into a public star. This job paid extremely well at the highest level. Words shaped destiny. Literary ghostwriter, fame without the risk. Not all Roman authors wrote their own works. Ghostwriters helped politicians, generals, and elites craft speeches, memoirs, and letters. They worked behind the scenes, trading recognition for safety and pay. It was a clever job for skilled writers who valued security over fame. Invisible hands shaped public memory. Personal physician to the elite, medicine meets luxury. Being a general doctor was respectable. Being a personal physician to an elite household was exceptional. These doctors lived well, enjoyed protection, and received generous rewards. They treated chronic conditions, advised on diet, and traveled with their patrons. Health was priceless, and so were those who guarded it. Personal trainer, sculpting Roman ideals. Romans valued strength and appearance. Elite households hired personal trainers to maintain physical fitness. These trainers supervised exercise, diet, and training routines. It was a respected role tied closely to elite lifestyles. Health was status. Fashion consultant, dressing power. Clothing in Rome signaled rank, citizenship, and authority. Fashion consultants advised elites on fabrics, colors, and styles appropriate for public life. Getting this wrong could damage reputation. Getting it right could elevate status. Appearance mattered. Tailor to the elite, crafting identity. Beyond advice, elite tailors created custom garments. They worked with high-quality materials and influential clients. Their workshops were protected and well paid. A perfectly cut toga was political armor. Jewelry appraiser, trusted with fortunes. Jewelry was wealth you could wear. Jewelry appraisers evaluated gems, gold, and heirlooms. This required trust, expertise, and discretion. Appraisers worked closely with the wealthy and powerful. Accuracy meant credibility and profit. Interior decorator, designing Roman luxury. Wealthy Romans cared deeply about aesthetics. Interior decorators arranged mosaics, furniture, statues, and colors. They shaped impressions during social visits. Luxury was intentional. Garden designer, controlling nature. Roman villas featured elaborate gardens. Garden designers planned layouts, fountains, paths, and plants. They created peaceful, impressive spaces. Nature curated became status. Fountain engineer, beauty through water. Fountains symbolized abundance. Fountain engineers designed flowing water displays for villas and public spaces. Their work combined engineering and art. Flowing water was power made visible. Event planner, orchestrating. Influence. Elite Romans hosted banquets, celebrations, and ceremonies. Event planners handled logistics, food, entertainment, and guest coordination. Successful events strengthened alliances and reputations. Celebration was strategy. Banquet manager, feeding power. Banquets were political tools. Banquet managers coordinated kitchens, servants, timing, and presentation. They ensured everything ran smoothly. Food was diplomacy. Chef for the elite, art on a plate. Elite chefs weren't cooks, they were artists. They prepared exotic dishes, managed kitchens, and impressed guests. A famous chef could command high pay and prestige. Taste was luxury. Wine steward, master of the table. Wine required expertise. Wine steward selected, stored, and served wines. They advised elites on quality and pairing. Knowledge elevated pleasure. Entertainment manager, curating culture. Music, poetry, performances, elite households employed entertainment managers. They hired performers and planned shows. Culture was reputation. Music tutor, sound of status. Music signaled refinement. Music tutors taught instruments and performance. Their students were elite. Art shaped identity. Art dealer, moving masterpieces. Roman elites collected art. Art dealers sourced, authenticated, and sold works. This job connected commerce and culture. Taste was currency. Private librarian, knowledge on demand. Elite homes housed libraries. Private librarians managed collections and research. This was a calm, intellectual role with security. Silence was privilege. Personal advisor, influence without office. Some individuals served as personal advisors, offering counsel on politics, finance, or strategy. They held no official title, but enormous influence. Whispered advice shaped decisions. Why luxury jobs were ideal. These careers offered comfortable living, elite protection, high pay, low physical risk, social mobility. They thrived on trust, skill, and discretion. In Rome, proximity to wealth was often better than wealth itself. By now, it's clear that ancient Rome rewarded far more than brute strength or noble birth. Some of the smartest careers were unexpected, jobs that most people overlook, underestimate, or misunderstand. These roles didn't always sound impressive, but they offered safety, income, autonomy, and long-term survival in one of history's toughest societies. This part focuses on the unconventional, overlooked, and quietly brilliant jobs that made Roman life genuinely good. Freedman business manager, from slavery to stability. One of Rome's most unique features was manumission. Freed slaves, called freedmen, often became business managers for their former masters. They ran shops, estates, shipping interests, and workshops. Because freedmen were legally tied to their patrons, they were trusted with major responsibilities. This job provided income, protection, and social mobility. Many freedmen became extremely wealthy, sometimes wealthier than freeborn citizens. In Rome, freedom was only the beginning. Workshop owner, small business, big control. Rome was full of workshops. Pottery, metalwork, leather, textiles, every city needed them. Owning a workshop meant controlling production and profit. While the work required effort, owners delegated labor and focused on management. It was a respectable, stable career with steady demand. Craft plus commerce equaled survival. Brand manager. Yes, Rome had branding. Certain Roman products were famous. Wine, garum, pottery, oil, all marked with stamps and symbols. Brand managers ensured consistency, quality, and reputation. Consumers trusted names. Reputation sold products long before advertising. Garum producer, smelly, profitable gold. Garum, fermented fish sauce, was everywhere. It smelled awful during production, but high-quality garum sold for premium prices. Garum producers who mastered the craft made fortunes. The smell stayed at the factory. The money followed you home. Food supply contractor, feeding everyone. Cities needed food. Food supply contractors secured meat, grain, fish, and produce. They worked with farmers, markets, and officials. This job meant steady income and state support. Food security was power. Butcher for the elite, clean work, good pay. Not all butchers were equal. Elite households hired private butchers to ensure quality and hygiene. This was a clean, respected role compared to public slaughterhouses. Specialization improved status. Fishmonger with a fleet, master of the coast. Fresh fish was luxury. Fishmongers with boats and crews supplied elites. Speed and freshness commanded high prices. This was entrepreneurship tied to geography. Ice trader, cooling luxury. Ice was rare and valuable. Ice traders harvested ice from mountains and stored it. They supplied elites for cooling drinks and food. This was seasonal but extremely profitable. Cold was status. Salt merchant, controlling preservation. Salt preserved food and flavored meals. Salt merchants supplied armies and cities. Demand never dropped. This was one of the safest trades in Rome. Salt built empires. Candle and lamp oil supplier, lighting the night. Rome didn't sleep early. Lamp oil suppliers kept homes, streets, and temples lit. Steady demand meant steady income. Light meant security. Perfume ingredient trader, luxury logistics. Perfumers needed rare materials. Ingredient traders sourced resins, oils, and spices. This role connected global trade and local luxury. Scarcity increased profit. Cosmetics specialist, beauty as business. Cosmetics mattered. Cosmetics specialists prepared creams, powders, and treatments. They served elite clients. Beauty was investment. Midwife, trusted with life. Midwives were essential. They assisted births and advised families. This was respected, stable work. Trust built security. Wet nurse, intimate and protected. Wealthy families hired wet nurses. They were paid well and protected. This role provided comfort and long-term support. Proximity to elite families meant safety. Funeral organizer, business in death. Romans honored the dead. Funeral organizers arranged rites, processions, and memorials. This was steady business. People always died. Ritual created reputation. Tomb builder, building for eternity. Elite tombs required craftsmanship. Tomb builders worked on long-term projects. This was specialized, respected work. Death paid well. Gravestone carver, memory in stone. Names mattered. Gravestone carvers preserved legacies. This job offered steady commissions. Memory was commerce. Fortune teller, belief equals profit. Romans believed deeply in omens. Fortune tellers advised on travel, marriage, and politics. While risky if wrong, successful ones thrived. Belief paid. Astrologer, consulting the stars. Astrology guided decisions. Astrologers served elites and generals. Knowledge, real or perceived, created influence. The stars sold certainty. Dream interpreter, meaning in sleep. Dreams mattered. Dream interpreters offered guidance. This was niche, but valued. Fear created demand. Religious supplier, equipping faith. Temples needed offerings. Religious suppliers sold incense, animals, and objects. Faith never lacked customers. Temple administrator, sacred stability. Temples managed wealth. Temple administrators oversaw finances and rituals. This role offered respect and protection. Sacred space was safe space. Why these jobs worked? These roles succeeded because they met constant demand, avoided politics, built trust, operated locally, scaled with population. They weren't glamorous. They were reliable. And reliability was survival. By now, one thing should be obvious: ancient Rome was dangerous, but not equally dangerous for everyone. Some jobs looked risky on the surface. They were close to violence, crime, punishment, or chaos. Yet surprisingly, these roles often came with legal protection, steady income, and social insulation. In this part, we explore the careers people assume were terrible, but were actually smart, survivable, and sometimes lucrative if you understood the system. Prison guard, authority without frontline danger. Roman prisons were not long-term punishment centers. They were holding facilities. Prison guards maintained order, transported prisoners, and enforced rules. This role carried legal authority, state backing, and steady pay. Guards were rarely targets of blame. The system protected them. In a violent society, official authority was safety. Execution assistant, disturbing but protected. Executions were public and regulated. Those who assisted in carrying them out worked under state authority. This was socially uncomfortable, but legally protected and paid. Execution assistants were insulated from retaliation. The job wasn't admired, but it was secure. City Watch officer, law without battlefields. Rome City Watch handled theft, disputes, and nighttime patrols. Watch officers avoided battlefield risks while still enjoying official status. They received pay, uniforms, and legal backing. Urban order created stability. Border administrator, security without combat. Not all border roles involved fighting. Border administrators handled records, supplies, and inspections. They worked near danger, but not in it. This job came with military protection and administrative prestige. Fortress quartermaster, supplying power. Armies moved on logistics. Quartermasters managed food, equipment, and storage. They rarely fought, but were essential. The army protected what it needed. And it needed quartermasters. Military paymaster, controlling the purse. Soldiers cared about pay. Paymasters handled salaries and bonuses. This role was highly protected. Money required trust. Trust brought safety. Veteran settlement officer, managing retired soldiers. Rome rewarded veterans with land. Settlement officers organized these communities. They worked with disciplined, loyal populations. This was a calm, respected role. Retirement planning was state policy. Arms inspector, quality over combat. Weapons needed inspection. Arms inspectors checked quality and safety. They ensured standards were met. This was technical, respected work. Inspection prevented disaster. Armor fitter, protection pays. Armor saved lives. Armor fitters customized gear. This job was specialized and in demand. Soldiers trusted those who protected them. Siege engineer consultant, thinking, not fighting. Sieges were intellectual battles. Consultants advised on strategy and construction. They stayed behind lines. Brains over blades. War correspondent, recording victory. Rome valued records. War correspondents documented campaigns. They traveled with protection. History was written by professionals. Battlefield medic, risk with reward. Medics treated wounded soldiers. While dangerous, they were protected. Skill meant survival. Healing was valued. Veteran trainer, teaching experience. Retired soldiers trained recruits. Veteran trainers lived safely while passing knowledge. Experience became income. Military bureaucrat, war from a desk. Campaigns required paperwork. Military bureaucrats handled planning and supply. They were far from weapons. War needed administration. Imperial courier, protected speed. Official couriers carried sealed messages. They traveled fast, with authority. Interfering with them was illegal. Speed equaled safety. Emergency coordinator, order in crisis. Fires, floods, riots, Rome faced disasters. Emergency coordinators organized responses. They gained public respect. Crisis created opportunity. Public health officer, managing survival. Clean water and sanitation mattered. Public health officers monitored conditions. This role was preventive and respected. Health preserved productivity. Funeral law officer, rules of death. Funerals followed strict laws. Funeral law officers ensured compliance. This was niche, but stable. Order extended even to death. Riot mediator, calming the crowd. Rome rioted often. Mediators negotiated between crowds and officials. They prevented violence. Words saved lives. Slavery registry officer, controlling ownership. Slavery required records. Registry officers documented ownership and transfers. This was bureaucratic, but powerful. Records created legitimacy. Manumission official, managing freedom. Freeing slaves required approval. Manumission officials processed legal transitions. This role handled life-changing decisions. Authority brought respect. Provincial security liaison, order without force. Provinces needed coordination. Security liaisons worked between local leaders and Rome. They prevented rebellion through communication. Diplomacy avoided bloodshed. Court security officer, guarding power. Courts needed protection. Court security officers ensured safety. They were visible and protected. Law enforced itself. Why these risky jobs were actually smart? These roles worked because they offered state protection, clear authority, steady pay, defined rules, predictable risk. In Rome, unofficial danger killed. Official danger protected. Rome was not only about power and wealth, it was about structure, survival, and strategy. Beyond the top-tier and luxury jobs, there existed a hidden network of positions that most modern observers underestimate. These jobs weren't glamorous, but they offered security, respect, and long-term opportunity, sometimes better than prestige alone. Let's explore these underrated roles and why they mattered. Archivist for elite families, memory as influence. Elite Romans kept records, not just public, but personal. Estates, correspondence, and legal papers needed management. Archivists preserved this knowledge. They weren't public figures, but they were trusted, protected, and influential. Why it mattered: families relied on archives for inheritance disputes, business deals, and political strategy. Knowledge gave them quiet power. Specialist craftsmen, niche skills, big demand. Some skills were rare, and rarity meant profit. Glassblowers producing fine vessels. Bronze casters for statues and tools. Leather armor specialists for soldiers. These craftsmen could demand high pay, and their expertise made them indispensable. Rarity created influence, even without social rank. Moneylender, lending safely to the wealthy. Moneylending was risky for small borrowers, but lending to elites or the state could be incredibly safe and profitable. Moneylenders who built trust with merchants, officials, and magistrates often lived well beyond ordinary citizens. Interest and repayment contracts were protected by law, making wealth accumulation methodical and secure. Courier for officials, protected mobility. We discussed imperial couriers briefly, but they deserve another mention. These couriers traveled long distances carrying official documents and letters. Because interfering with a courier was illegal, this job offered mobility, protection, and opportunity to network. Many used the position to learn trade routes, politics, and provincial secrets, turning a messenger job into a career launchpad. Animal handler, exotic pets and livestock. Romans loved animals, for farms, entertainment, and pets. Handlers of exotic animals for games, circus events, or wealthy homes. Livestock managers for farms and estates. These positions were reliable and occasionally lucrative, especially when managing prized animals. Trust and skill brought long-term employment and safety. Professional entertainer, influence without risk. While gladiators risked their lives, performers, actors, musicians, dancers, poets, worked entertainment careers that offered fame and access without constant physical danger. Successful entertainers often lived with or near elite households, gaining protection, gifts, and patronage. Rome valued culture, and culture paid well for skill. Astrologer and soothsayer, profitable belief. Belief shaped Roman decisions, political, personal, and military. Astrologers and soothsayers could advise generals, governors, and wealthy households. If accurate or persuasive, they earned substantial rewards, lived safely, and maintained influence. Knowledge of omens and the stars was commerce in disguise. Tutor to gladiators or athletes, shaping champions. Beyond elite children, Rome trained professional athletes and gladiators. Tutors and trainers guided technique, fitness, and tactics. Though their students risked death, the trainers themselves were well compensated, protected, and socially recognized among the elite who owned arenas and teams. Skill in shaping champions was a path to wealth and influence. Advisor in provincial administration, small power, big safety. Rome governed an enormous empire. Provinces needed managers who were skilled but not politically threatening. Provincial advisors assisted governors, managed records, or oversaw projects. They were insulated from frontline danger, yet experienced influence and sometimes wealth. In Rome, proximity to authority often mattered more than authority itself. Public bath manager, health, leisure, and influence. Public baths were central to Roman social life. Managers oversaw operations, hygiene, scheduling, and staff. They gained prestige, steady pay, and access to influential citizens who frequented the baths. This was a quiet, stable, and surprisingly powerful role in urban society. Road engineer, infrastructure equals influence. Rome's roads were its lifeblood. Engineers maintaining bridges, aqueducts, and roads ensured trade, military mobility, and urban safety. These engineers were respected, protected, and well paid, without ever facing battlefield risk. Infrastructure careers combined skill, prestige, and security. Summarizing the true Roman best jobs. When we look across all 7 parts, the pattern is clear. Influence without exposure, behind-the-scenes power often outweighed public fame. Essential skill, mastery of trade, craft, or knowledge provided security and respect. Proximity to wealth, serving elites could yield comfort and opportunity. Reliability over glory, predictable income and stability mattered more than prestige. Legal protection, official or state-sanctioned roles kept individuals safe from chaos. In essence, the smartest Romans didn't chase drama. They found roles where the system protected them and where they were indispensable. So far, we've explored elite positions, luxury roles, trade careers, administrative jobs, and surprisingly safe, risky professions. But Rome was a massive, diverse empire, and with diversity came unexpected opportunities, jobs most modern people would overlook but that offered security, influence, and comfort. In this part, we'll uncover hidden gems, careers that were underrated, clever, or specialized, sometimes highly profitable, sometimes quietly prestigious. Water carrier, vital, stable, and protected. Rome was a city of millions, and water was life. Water carriers ensured fountains, baths, and households received fresh water. While simple, this job was steady, essential, and respected. Public officials often relied on experienced water carriers to maintain urban order. Reliability here meant long-term employment and social protection. Latrine supervisor, hygiene as authority. Rome's urban density demanded sanitation. Latrine supervisors monitored public toilets, maintained cleanliness, and collected fees where applicable. It was a low-glamour role, but vital. Maintaining hygiene prevented disease outbreaks, earned public appreciation, and offered legal protection and consistent income. Gladiator recruiter, talent spotter and negotiator. Gladiators were Rome's entertainers, and trainers didn't operate alone. Recruiters scouted talent, negotiated contracts, and ensured teams had elite fighters. They rarely fought themselves, but their influence over the games, and access to wealthy sponsors, was considerable. Success here meant profit, protection, and recognition among elite circles. Animal importer, exotic trade specialist. Rome imported exotic animals for games, private menageries, and rituals. Animal importers coordinated shipments from Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. This was a high-risk but high-reward career, as rarity equaled enormous value. Knowledge of logistics, trade laws, and animal care created both wealth and elite connections. Temple musician, sacred performance. Music wasn't just entertainment, it was sacred. Temple musicians performed during rituals, ceremonies, and festivals. They lived under the protection of religious institutions, enjoyed steady pay, and maintained social respect. Skill plus spirituality meant stability. Spice merchant, aromatic influence. Romans loved spices, imported from the far reaches of the known world. Spice merchants specialized in cinnamon, pepper, saffron, and more. This trade was lucrative, connected to global commerce, and consistently in demand among wealthy households. Exotic flavors brought exotic profits. Architect's assistant, learning while earning. Rome's buildings required teams. Architect's assistants handled drafting, measurements, and supervision under senior architects. This role offered on-the-job education, steady pay, and future independence. Many assistants later became master architects themselves. Sculptor's apprentice, craft meets patronage. Art was profitable if tied to elite patronage. Apprentices in workshops learned techniques while contributing labor. They were protected, educated, and occasionally compensated with access to powerful clients. Skill acquisition in youth became wealth in adulthood. Grain storage manager, controlling essential supply. Grain was the lifeblood of Rome. Storage managers oversaw warehouses, inventories, and security. A well-managed granary ensured steady income, respect, and protection from state authorities. In a city prone to shortages, this job carried real influence. Road surveyor, mapping the empire. Rome's roads were legendary. Surveyors measured, mapped, and maintained routes, often working with engineers and administrators. This work required skill, precision, and mobility, but was otherwise safe. Roads connected Rome's trade, military, and politics, making surveyors quietly indispensable. Lamp maker, lighting Roman life. Romans didn't have electricity, they needed light. Lamp makers produced clay, bronze, and glass lamps. They served homes, temples, and public spaces. Steady demand meant consistent profit, and high-quality craftsmanship brought elite patronage. Perfume trader, selling luxury in a bottle. Perfume was a marker of wealth. Perfume traders sourced oils, blended scents, and sold them to households and temples. Exotic products, rarity, and quality meant high pay and social respect. Luxury industries were often safer than manual labor, yet far more profitable. Cultural consultant, taste as influence. Elite Romans curated their homes, events, and gardens. Cultural consultants advised on aesthetics, decoration, and style. Their work influenced social perception, strengthened networks, and provided long-term stability in a city obsessed with reputation. Why these hidden jobs mattered. The underlying theme for these underrated careers. Essential service, providing what Rome relied on guaranteed demand. Skill and reliability, mastery ensured payment and protection. Access to elites, connections often proved more valuable than titles. Predictable risk, even unusual or exotic jobs were safer under the empire's structure. In short, the clever Roman didn't need a toga or sword, just a niche, skill, or connection. By now, you've seen the full spectrum: elite power, luxury trades, essential administrators, skilled professionals, and surprisingly safe, risky jobs. But Rome had a few final hidden gems, careers that combined rarity, wealth, and influence, often overlooked even in detailed historical records. These are the jobs that gave individuals maximum reward for intelligence, skill, and strategic positioning. Imperial librarian, knowledge at the center of power. The emperor's libraries weren't just collections of books, they were power centers. Imperial librarians managed manuscripts, scrolls, and records. Being trusted with this knowledge meant access to secrets, political plans, and elite correspondence. They lived safely, enjoyed steady pay, and could influence cultural and political decisions behind the scenes. State architect, designing the empire. Some architects worked directly for the state, designing temples, aqueducts, forums, and public monuments. This role offered prestige, protection, and access to elite patrons. Their work shaped Rome's identity and legacy, often granting fame that lasted centuries. Skill plus influence equals a dream job in ancient urban society. Imperial chef, feeding the most powerful. The emperor and elite families required exclusive chefs. These chefs created lavish banquets, exotic dishes, and carefully curated menus. They worked close to power, received generous rewards, and were often protected by the household, avoiding street-level risks. Food was diplomacy, and chefs controlled a subtle form of influence. Medalist coin designer, currency and creativity. Coins weren't just money, they were propaganda. Medallists and coin designers shaped the empire's image through portraits, symbols, and messages. Their designs reached millions, carried authority, and required skill plus trust. Influence extended far beyond the studio. Chief engineer, maintaining Rome's lifelines. Rome's infrastructure, roads, bridges, aqueducts, and ports, required careful oversight. Chief engineers coordinated construction projects, labor, and maintenance. They were protected by law, respected socially, and often received elite patronage. The empire literally depended on them. Cultural historian, chronicler, writing legacy. Romans valued memory and legacy. Chroniclers recorded events, military campaigns, and public ceremonies. This role offered access to historical knowledge, elite circles, and influence over public perception. Memory itself became power, making this a quiet yet influential career. Estate overseer, wealth without ownership. Elite estates required management. Overseers coordinated labor, finances, and production across farms and villas. They lived within elite households, received steady income, and learned wealth management skills, sometimes enough to become wealthy themselves. The closer you were to wealth, the safer and richer life became. Exotic goods trader, scarcity equals power. Rome's elites loved imported luxuries, silks, rare woods, spices, and gemstones. Traders who specialized in these goods could command huge profits and elite connections. Rarity and expertise meant long-term financial security and social prestige. Temple scribe, sacred bureaucracy. Temples weren't just religious, they were economic centers. Temple scribes recorded donations, managed accounts, and maintained ritual calendars. This work offered security, steady pay, and proximity to elite decision-makers. Faith plus administration equaled stability. Patrons' personal messenger, trust and access. Some messengers were not just couriers, they were personal agents for influential patrons. These roles required reliability, discretion, and speed. In return, messengers gained protection, influence, and access to information most citizens could only dream of. Information was power, and the system protected its trusted carriers. Why these rare jobs were the smartest of all. Across all 9 parts, the common traits of the best jobs emerge clearly. Proximity to wealth and power, even without status, being trusted by elites granted influence and protection. Skill and specialization, knowledge, craft, and expertise created demand and safety. Reliability over daring. The system rewarded consistency, not reckless heroism. Legally backed authority. State-sanctioned roles minimized risk in a dangerous empire. Influence without exposure. Behind-the-scenes power often outlasted public glory. In essence, Rome didn't just reward strength or birth. It rewarded strategy, skill, and usefulness. Closing thoughts 4. If there's a lesson from Rome's workforce, it's simple. You didn't need to be a senator, general, or gladiator to thrive. You needed intelligence, skill, and strategic placement. The best lives were those built on stability, trust, and usefulness, often quietly and without fame. Ancient Rome was dangerous, but in the right career, it could also be profitable, safe, and even luxurious. The empire didn't survive on glory alone, it survived on the clever choices of ordinary people in extraordinary roles. After exploring over 160 careers across 10 parts, one thing is clear: ancient Rome was a world of extremes. Violence, hierarchy, and chaos coexisted with luxury, stability, and opportunity. The difference between survival and prosperity often came down to choosing the right career, one that offered security, influence, and access to wealth. In this final installment, we'll rank the ultimate best jobs, summarize lessons, and reveal the principles that made life in Rome not just survivable, but enjoyable. The absolute top jobs in Rome. These roles combined wealth, influence, security, and longevity. They were coveted by those who understood Rome's system. Senator or provincial governor, power, influence, and the ability to shape the empire itself. Imperial secretary advisor, proximity to the emperor, influence without exposure. Banker tax contractor, wealth accumulation through commerce, finance, and trust. Personal physician to the elite, life-saving skills, protected by households, and high pay. Chief architect engineer, shaping the empire while earning patronage, respect, and safety. Lesson: true power often comes from influence, not brute force. Luxury careers that offered comfort. These jobs allowed life of comfort, safety, and social access. Personal stewards and household administrators managed estates and staff with protection and status. Tutors, music teachers, and rhetoric coaches educated elite children, gained lifelong connections. Fashion consultants, jewelers, and artists enhanced elite lifestyles, earned patronage, and lived well. Event planners, chefs, and banquet managers curated culture, impressed elites, and earned influence. Lesson: proximity to wealth often mattered more than wealth itself. Trust and skill were the currencies of comfort. Skilled trade and commerce careers. These roles provided independence, steady income, and opportunity for wealth. Merchants, spice traders, and wine producers, trade, rarity, and demand guaranteed profit. Workshop owners, garum producers. And specialized craftsmen, entrepreneurship with scalability. Grain storage managers and food supply contractors, essential work, state-backed security. Lesson: mastering a skill or trade guaranteed survival, and in Rome, survival often meant prosperity. Safe risk careers. Some jobs seemed dangerous but were actually protected by law, authority, or patronage. Prison guards and execution assistants, legal authority shielded them. military administrators and paymasters, close to armies without frontline danger. Provincial advisors and couriers, access to power while remaining protected. Lesson: safety didn't require avoidance of danger, it required operating inside the system. Hidden gems and niche roles. Finally, Rome had careers rare, subtle, and incredibly rewarding. Imperial librarians, temple scribes, and chroniclers, influence through knowledge and memory. Exotic animal importers and perfume traders, niche, specialized, and high profit. Cultural consultants, garden designers, and fountain engineers, luxury work valued by elites. Lesson: sometimes the most desirable roles were quiet, rare, and highly specialized, but they offered stability and influence no army or senate could match. Core principles for success in ancient Rome. Across all 10 parts, the smartest Romans shared strategies. Serve the system. The empire protected those who were useful. Master a skill, knowledge, craft, and trade created demand and stability. Build trust, reputation and reliability unlocked elite patronage. Position strategically, proximity to wealth, power, and influence mattered more than rank. Prioritize safety and stability, consistent work often outweighed fame or glory. Rome wasn't just a place of luck, it was a place where clever choices, discipline, and skill determined a good life. Closing thoughts, lessons for today. While we often romanticize gladiators, senators, and emperors, the truth is this: ordinary Romans could thrive if they understood opportunity, skill, and social positioning. The empire survived centuries not just on conquest, but on careers that made it function: administrators, artisans, merchants, and professionals who mastered their craft, served wisely, and positioned themselves strategically. In the end, the best job in Rome wasn't the one with the loudest prestige, it was the one that combined safety, influence, income, and longevity. For those who understood the system, ancient Rome could be not just survivable, but prosperous, respected, and even luxurious.